Your body keeps the score. That's the ultimate result. So when you are 55, 60, and you're planning on retirement, I guarantee you're going to have some sort of disease, right, related to stress, because it's not the one moment of stress, right, but it's the accumulation of stress over, let's say, 40 years of your corporate career that you haven't unloaded.
In today's show, I am delighted to be introduced by Clint Rahe. Clint is an international speaker, a facilitator, and high performance coach who specializes in mental resilience and energy optimization. With a background as a physical training instructor in the Royal Air Force, where he prepared fast jet pilots, and recently he has worked with elite athletes, Clint brings a unique perspective to the corporate world. He is the creator of the Cognitive Athlete Framework, which integrates sports science, neuroscience, and behavioral psychology to help leaders and teams thrive under pressure without burning out. Clint's work is all about building the cognitive architecture required to scale with purpose. Clint, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Absolutely delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Cool. Thanks, Brendan. Thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Looking forward to the conversation. I have had lots of ex-military personnel on the show, but I've never had, who've all spoken to high performance, but I've never had the personal trainer. I've never gone to the source of their high performance, so I'm excited for this conversation today.
That's not disappointing.
Absolutely. Look, Clint, you know our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So Clint, to kick off the show, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Look, I think scaling with purpose is really growing your business without breaking people effectively. I think when we grow our business, what gets us there, all the hard work, the late nights, the constant demands and problem solving, it gets us to a certain point. But then that becomes our bottleneck as well. So I think when we then start hiring people and getting more strategy and more structure, we tend to go back to our old ways of doing things, which it just doesn't release the business to grow. And all that pressure on leaders, when I take it from my lens, all the pressure on leaders, it just creates a lot of stress. It creates a lot of brain fog. It creates a lot of frustration. And then that really, the ultimate thing, that then impacts decision quality. And to grow a business successfully, it's around making consistently good choices over a period of time.
I love that. We've never had that scaling without breaking people. I've had the wonderful Marshall Goldsmith on the podcast, who actually wrote the book, What Got You to Here Won't Get You to There, which is what you're referencing. And I think that scaling without breaking people is something that resonates strongly with us. We actually use the metaphor of getting people to the top of whatever their scale Everest is, to the summit of their scale Everest. And we want to get them there such that they've felt suitably challenged. They've grown as a result of actually getting to the summit of their respective scale Everest, their respective mountain, their respective peak. And they've encouraged and inspired their team through their role modeling, through their coaching, through the rituals and practices, also to get to the top of that summit. So they're kind of metaphorically high-fiving when they got there, celebrating the fact that they're there, that actually they've done something they didn't fully believe maybe that they could do, or certainly they've grown more than they ever expected to, and they're ready to go again, as opposed to the version where they're arriving up the top, they're a frazzled wreck of what they were whenever they started the journey. Their closest relationships are in tatters, and their team's all strewn along the mountainside saying, why the hell did you take us up here? So I'm curious, Clint, your background is absolutely fascinating. You've gone from personal training, as I alluded to in the intro, in the RAF, training these fighter pilots to perform at the very highest level. So can you share a moment, maybe it was over a period of time, but was there a moment or a period of time, realization that that what you were doing in the military was actually seeding high performance, and that this could be brought into other disciplines like sport and importantly for us, business.
Yeah, look, absolutely. As a physical training instructor, you're everywhere and you have to train everybody. And for me, I think it's not until you full cycle your career that you sort of reflect back and you go, oh, got ya. So when we were out there early in the morning training these people in Scotland in the middle of winter to be ready for operations in Iraq and Afghanistan where it's 40 degrees, there's a reason behind that. And so it's really deconstructing that. So I think reflecting back, it's always been part of my psyche, my development, because as if I go back to the as a physical training instructor, you could be training in the morning, so doing your individual training or group training with your peers, and then in an hour, you're out there, you're in front of everybody. So you could be running a station circuit, for example, on an air base. There could be 150 people there. You have to be on your A game straight away. No mistakes. You have to stand with your posture. You wear a white shorts, white vest, white jacket, white Reebok Classics, white socks, and everyone can see you, and they're looking at you for clarity, for direction. So you have to really role model that, and then you come off that circuit, and then you have a bit of a debrief, and then you could be onto another activity or you could be onto another task. But then later on that day, you could be on again for another circuit doing something else. So you could be swimming, doing a swimming circuit. You could be out taking sport. You could be out teaching a classroom, anatomy and physiology. So for me, it's always been where are the peak moments I need to switch on, and where are the moments where I need to have a break and have a rest, and then in between that, it's the transition. For me, it's a transition between off and on is the key really, and that comes back to preparation, rehearsal, preparation. Repetition is really key in these moments because when you arrive at that performance moment, the high performance moment, you're ready. The military is the best training organization in the world. And you mentioned like fast jet pilots, for example, they, they don't just go, hey, you're going flying today. They do a lot of ground training to start with, and they do many hours and many days and many weeks before they're even allowed to go flying. And then when they're flying, they rehearse the flight. They rehearse all their checks. They're in their bedroom and they've got a mock-up of their cockpit and they're going through all the checklists and they're doing everything before they even get onto the flight. And one of the things with pilots, that flight that they're on could be their last flight. It's their check flight for them to move on to the next phase of training. And that training really never stops. In the military, you are training all the time. If you're not on operations, you're training. So it's been inbred in me for years and years. And through that, I've been fortunate enough to be involved within high performance sports teams. Now, that's a whole different kettle of fish, but it's pretty much the same in terms of when you step onto that pitch, you got to be ready for your peak performance. But it's either side of that really matters. So, are you training? Are you recovering at the end of it as well? So it's not just I'm winging it today. It's like, no, this is intentional, whenever I want to do it. So, that's where my background comes from. So then when I reflect on it and I then when I retired from the military and then I stepped into corporate, I'm like, what is going on here? Like, where's the structure? Where's the system? What do I need? What time do I need to turn up? What's my job? I get zero feedback. How do I prepare for this? Yeah, here's your induction manual. Read that one. Oh, by the way, we haven't got your login yet because IT is broken. Oh, here's your phone, but it hasn't got haven't got the lock to unlock it because the person left and they were unhappy. And so, that whole corporate structure doesn't exist. So I've been lucky in my background to have had that real structure, the system, work in high performance environment. So then now I can bring it into the corporate context.
Yeah, That's fascinating. It was Steve Jobs that said you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only ever connect them looking back, which is what you're
Yeah,
suggesting here in terms of your
yeah,
insight and your reflections. It was only when you're reflecting back you were able to actually ascertain and discern the fact that there is a rhythm to the military that actually has application in sport and in business. I love your new book. For those who are listening, you won't be able to see me hold up The Cognitive Athlete. Absolutely love the name, and this is one that I've defaced. We coach on the importance of leading self first before you lead others,
yeah.
before you lead an organization. So let's get into this. The Cognitive Athlete. What is it, and what problem did you set out to solve in this book, Clint?
Yeah, I think if you think about now modern professionals, we are knowledge workers. And I think it was Peter Drucker that coined that phrase in terms of knowledge workers, which it's someone that uses their brain to do their job, right? So whether you are thinking, being creative, problem solving, making decisions, you're using your brain. So, but most people, they don't train their brains. We know from sport to get better at sport, we need to train our bodies, but no one's really been looking into how do we then train our minds to peak at the right times. Now, that's where I coined the phrase cognitive athlete because it's around now, or how do I now I know I'm a knowledge worker, how do I then protect my cognitive load? How do I then protect my decision quality? So I'm making the best possible decisions at the right time. Work with my body's rhythms and my brain's focus rhythms. And we'll get into that later on. And then the most important thing is when for knowledge work, it's the recovery cycles. Nobody is scheduling these recovery cycles into their day, and they're going back to back to back meetings. And we're in this outdated model of productivity, right? We're in this whole production line worker mindset, whereas more hours equals more output. Well, on a production line, yes, you pay more money, you get more hours, you get more output. However, we work with our brains, knowledge workers, and it doesn't work. And I would imagine, all of your listeners have experienced some sort of brain fog in their life, or irritability or frustration. And that's a result of having accumulated stress and cognitive load and all these decisions that you're making every day that's impacting your clarity of your thought. So if you're making right or wrong decisions, or it's not as black and white as that, but that's a cognitive athlete now, is to go, okay, I'm now going to be intentional with how I train my brain. So it's training your brain like an athlete trains their bodies.
Love that. In terms of the ultimate consequence of not managing our mental load, what do you see is the kind of the outcome of ignoring the fact that we can't be always on?
Yeah, great question. Your body keeps the score. That's the ultimate result. So when you are 55, 60, and you're planning on retirement, I guarantee you're going to have some sort of disease, right, related to stress, because it's not the one moment of stress, right, but it's the accumulation of stress over, let's say, 40 years of your corporate career that you haven't unloaded, right? There's a really good study recently done that says 80 women are 80% more likely to suffer from autoimmune conditions brought on through long-term low-level stress. So that's a consequence. When you are in your honeymoon period, you should be with your grandkids and on holiday, but more often than not, I would imagine, you would have some sort of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol. And I see that in my experience. And for the book, when I started asking people questions and just telling people about, your body keeps a score, they're sort of looking at me going, why do you mention cardiovascular disease? I'm like, well, because that's a result of not managing your cognitive load effectively over your career. Oh, I've got that. I'm like, yeah, okay. what else? So and that conversation just keeps repeating itself. And I thought there's a pattern here. And then when I then looked at their calendars, I was like, poof, there you go. There's the pattern, plain and simple. People want to do a good job, but sometimes it's those boundaries around the outside that we haven't got real clarity on. So we end up, maybe it's the expectations, right? The expectations is we're always on from January to December, but the reality is different. We go in peaks and troughs throughout the whole year. So that's where I thought, well, let's start analyzing this a little bit more. Let's start looking at the research and data, and that's where the whole concept of cognitive periodization has come from, really. Because I'll put my hand up. I've had brain fog. I've had periods where I've been unable to think clearly, and then when I've looked at it, I'm like, it's because I didn't go out for a run. It's because I've worked, you know, 20 days in a row without a break. And in the military, we had a structure for that. That's the thing. We had this structure. So you went on your operations for 6 months, but then you come back and you had like two weeks to a month off to decompress. And that just happens all the time. But in corporate, it just doesn't happen. And with founders in particular, they work 24/7, until their business grows. And then they say, I'll take the foot off the gas, but it doesn't happen. They actually work even harder. And then they phone me and, hey Clint, I've got a problem. I'm like, okay, well let's have a discussion about it.
I can't overstate how important your work is. Everything you've shared there resonates strongly. I had a significant event, a heart event, a number of years back, despite the fact that I have trained every day almost since I was 15, 16 years old. Always enjoyed my sports, martial arts, triathlon, and but actually I was not only over overloading the mind, I was also overloading the body in an attempt to actually de-stress from the load that I was putting on my mind. But so this is very, very close to home, I have to say. What I'm hearing from you, Clint, is ultimately you're not escaping this. You will pay the price, whether you escape it in your 30s, even maybe if you're fortunate in your 40s. But there's no escaping this. I've just entered. I'll be 51 this year, and I heard the term "sniper's alley" for the first time, which seems to be a horrible term, but this decade being the one where you're most vulnerable to all of these stresses manifesting in cardiovascular disease or
Yeah.
other particular illnesses. So ultimately, I mean, we are all about scaling in a sustainable, predictable, repeatable way that actually engenders a level of joy, flow, and ease. It seems idealistic, but like the what you describe in your book is certainly a method or framework to get us to that point. So there's a number of things that I want to come to. One is this word periodization. So let's drill into what periodization in the context of business leadership means. And then something that I'm really keen to understand is what you referred to there is the kind of calendar architecture. How do we design our calendars such that we're not always on, that we use the tools that we have to support a rhythm which is sustainable? So let's kick off with periodization and understanding kind of the phases that you've alluded to since we kicked off.
Yeah. So if I go to the athlete first, and then we can go to the cognitive periodization. Like if you think about we just had the Winter Olympics, and I used to be a ski
Amazing.
racer, and I've trained ski racers and Olympians and stuff, and we don't, we're not peaked all year, right? We've got specific times through the year where we need to be on form, on peak for our championships. But like I said, in the military, we have all of this time before to then train. And what periodization is in terms of an athlete, it's around spreading your training load over the whole season. Now, in sport, it's really easy, right? Season starts here, it finishes there. what dictates success? Am I a champion or not? Did I win that competition? So those are the real factors there. When we bring it back into the corporate world, what's your season? Like, that's the first thing we need to. What is your season? Is it 20 years, 1 year? All businesses, you mentioned it, all business is predictable and it works in cycles. Sales cycles is pretty predictable. Finance cycles is pretty predictable. So we need to sort of think about our training load maybe over a year. I would suggest 12 months. And then we need to then break it down into phases. So when do I need to peak? That's the first thing we need to look at. So, if I need to peak in June, there's no point me being peaking in January. So we've got 4 phases. So the first phase we're looking at is conditioning. So for athletes, we're looking at just a high volume, low intensity. You know this as a triathlete. In as a knowledge worker, as a cognitive athlete, we're looking at habits. So we're looking at getting some really good habits around sleep. So, getting up at consistent time, going to bed at a consistent time. If you were just to do those two things, it doesn't have to be cold room or anything like that, right? Just waking up and going to sleep. Exercise. So let's start working on maybe 2 times a week or 3 times a week or whatever works for that person. For exercise, then we need to look at, okay, let's look at my day. So how am I actually starting my day? Have I got a plan for Monday? Have I got a plan for Tuesday? And that plan just consists of, maybe it's your jobs to do list. What intentional moments do I have during the day? Who do I need to speak to? What's the most important thing I need to get done in that day? So then straight away, you're priming your brain to then achieve those goals and those targets. I don't think many people do that, or they just write this jobs to do list and it's not as intentional. And then we need to look at our day and then go, okay, are there any times during the day that we need to protect some time? So I would suggest everyone booking in, half an hour to an hour for lunch. Non-negotiable, it's in there. People can't book over the top of it then. And these are the sort of habits. Regular start time, so maybe it's 8:30. And the most important thing is a regular finish time. So we need to sort of bookend the day in the conditioning phase. So these are the habits. So if it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, you finish work and then you fill out your sheet. What went well, what didn't go so well, and what needs to be carried over to tomorrow that I didn't finish. Close down and then leave, and then push work away, and then you transition to home then. So then you commute home, and then because you've finished work as a good habit, you're turning up for your family or for your partner or for your pets or your friends, in peak as well. So you're not feeling drained because you've actually bookended it. So it's getting some really good habits just around some of the real basics in that conditioning phase.
Before we move on that,
Yeah,
a couple of things that you've mentioned, and we've had sleep experts on the show before. Sleep comes up time and time again,
yeah,
and I have to say, I'm an aura wearer, and I've been working on my sleep for years now. I became a breathwork practitioner and instructor through the Wim Hof method. That has helped my sleep. More recently, through the work of Patrick McKeown, who I've had in the podcast, who is
yeah,
a breathwork expert. He's an inventor of the myo tape,
yeah. I
taping
do that.
tape. Yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah,
I thought it was
yeah,
just to prevent snoring. I don't snore, but I started wearing it and it has increased my HRV, the heart rate
yeah,
variability. My overall readiness score has improved as a result of that.
yeah,
And I thought I had a good practice of actually only breathing through my nose, but it has been a game changer in terms of just a little hack around getting better sleep.
yeah.
Something you mentioned was the intentionality around starting your day versus just creating a to-do list. Just that can be quite nuanced.
Yeah.
What's the difference between being intentional versus just creating a to-do list?
Yeah. So don't confuse activity with results. That's what I want to preface this with. So that means if you've got a job to do list, you're just going to go and try and do them all at once. But you confuse an activity with results. So are the things on your list, are they going to move the needle when it comes to your business? Are they going to move the cogs If they are great, do it. If they're not, just get rid of them and delegate them, or just dump them completely. When you take the time in the morning to slow down, to then look at your day, look at your diary and your calendar to go, okay, what meetings have I got today? Right, I need to talk to this person in this meeting about strategic acquisition. I need to talk to this person in that meeting, specifically give them some coaching feedback around their tender presentation they did yesterday, or whatever. Right, as a leader of a business, those are the moments that really matter. All of the stuff on the jobs to do list, you could probably, it's that quadrant two matrix, isn't it? The four boxes. You can probably get rid of, you can get rid of 80% of those jobs, and we can say the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your activity will give you 80% of the results. So, but that's intention. So you're going, right, I'm going to go and talk to this person about that, right? I need to do this job here. I need to do all my spreadsheets because I've got an investor pitch, right? So, okay, I'm spending the next 2 hours in my diary to do that rather than answering emails, rather than Teams messages, rather than catching up for a coffee, because I know that's what's intention I need to get done. And it's not, I'll be honest, it is one of the most challenging things that that you're going to do, because effectively you're programming your brain to say, this is what's important, that's what's not important. And
Yes.
and it could come across as like, if you're if you're a CEO, you come across as being really quite unfriendly, but that's not the intention. So we just need to soften it a little bit and manufacture times during the day where you go out and talk to your workers and your colleagues and things. But between let's say 8 and 8:15, that period of time is blocked in your calendar for you to prepare for the day. That's what, and I've worked with some amazing leaders. That's what they do. They all do that. They spend the time up front to get clarity on the day, and then they go and execute the day. They have fun doing it too, right? Because they're doing the good stuff, it gives them more time to do the things that they actually enjoy doing.
Yeah, again, resonates strongly. I mean, we say if you do not have a vision for your own future, then you become a puppet to somebody else's. So, you're just
Yes.
reacting to that busyness, that activity that
Yeah.
you're interpreting as, performance is actually reactionary to someone else's agenda. So it's getting super clear on what your vision is,
Yeah.
the goals in relation to that vision, and actually structuring, being intentional to structure your day with
Yeah.
those one or two, three priorities that actually are going to move the needle in the context of the goals aligned to the vision. So that makes
Yeah.
complete sense, Clint, and
Yeah.
resonates strongly. Something else I want to come to is the linkage between physical exercise
Yeah.
with mental performance, with high cognitive performance. So, you're a physical trainer. You've lived in this world for decades.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're living in the world that we are, we overlook the just what we do as normal. But can you kind of affirm again the
Yeah.
importance of physical exercise in terms of undergirding kind of your
Yeah.
mental capacity to take on greater load?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I tell you a story about that just quickly?
Please.
So when I so in the RAF, if you don't train, people look at you and they're like, "What's the matter, fat lad? Why are you not training today?" Just, a bit about, we call it banter. So you train every single day. Now, when I went into corporate, no one trains at all, right? It's hardly anybody. And I was taking an hour lunch break, and I would go to the gym. I was lucky I was in Sydney, so I'd be able to go over the Harbour Bridge. Absolutely amazing. Imagine that, you run over the Harbour Bridge, you come back to work, and you're like, this is amazing. I've got the best job in the world, and I'm behind a computer. But what we know about the physiology is that when you go and exercise, you're increasing your blood flow to your brain specifically. It's getting more oxygen. You're able to think clearly. All of those stress hormones like cortisol are decreasing. So it's a mechanism to decompress all the stress. And you can see that within your body. As a result of doing that, your testosterone rises, which is your confidence hormone too. So it's sort of balancing all these hormones out. And when I came back from my training session, I was in the zone. And between like 2 and 5 o'clock, I would be able to smash out the whole day's work easy. It's just one of those things. You're much more productive. You're thinking clearer. You've been outside in nature. There's some good research about being just going for a walk, right? In trees around nature. So
Done a
if
full
you have if
podcast on it with Michael Gelb actually on the power of
oh
walking.
man, it's amazing, isn't it? So and you don't have to be a hardcore triathlete or you don't have to be a hardcore swimmer or anything like that. All it takes is you to get up, walk out of your office and go out for a walk outside. Because I think nowadays we are sat down so often and we get this blood pooling, right? So, and you wonder why your ankles are hurting at the end of the day and you got lower back problems, you're unable to touch your toes. And I've seen it. People just sit there for like 9, 10 hours a day behind a screen, not moving on artificial light. And Andrew Human talks about that in terms of your photoreceptors in your eyes and the sunlight coming through, how valuable that is. And we're here in artificial light inside when the sun is shining outside. And in that environment, I was just like, what is going on? Why are you not going out? And my boss at the time, he didn't appreciate that I was going out for a run at lunch. He's like, do you not like our team? I was like, it's got nothing to do with the team. This is for me because I need to be the best version of myself. And I know through exercise and movement, I'm going to come back. I'm going to be completely in peak performance, and I'll deliver excellence that is required for the job. Didn't get it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then said to me, so how are you going to repay that hour back that you're taking for lunch? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'll come in early. Do you know like I was like,
My
you
word.
you're confusing being in the office, just sat by my desk with results. That doesn't work. We're knowledge workers, right? Like, oh man.
Yeah, again, this resonates and what I'd encourage people to do. I did this, and what's really surprised me is the local council gym, which was this incredible facility, of sports pitches, indoor facilities, climbing racks. The gym at lunchtime might as well have been my personal gym. There was never anyone in it, and it
Right.
cost a quid 50 or something because it was a council
Yeah.
supported facility to go to this gym, and it had all of the latest equipment. And so I would encourage people, these facilities exist, and it's just about making the habit of actually taking that hour to exercise that is ultimately going to support your ability to take on a greater cognitive load, it sounds. So conditioning number one, and I could run a whole podcast on conditioning just alone.
Yeah.
So what's
Yeah.
next, Clint?
Yep. Yeah. So the next phase is transition. So this is the gap. This is the bridge really between you've done the really good habits and you're in a really good cycle, and now we're looking in the future to your performance. And maybe it is let's say a tender presentation, maybe it's a product launch, maybe it's a systems launch or program or something. So then what we need to do now is sharpen our focus. So this is where we need to look at our calendar. And you mentioned around being the calendar as your architect. We need to look at your calendar as a performance tool, not just a tool to manage time. So now what we need to do is start manufacturing opportunities for us to then practice, rehearse, prime ourselves for peak performance. So for example, let's say, and you could do this on a daily basis, right? As well as on a weekly and a monthly and so on. Let's say you have a difficult conversation that you need to have with an employee. Let's book it in the calendar at 10 a.m. Now, the transition part then is from 9:30 till 10 o'clock. What are you doing? Well, I'm going to be preparing. I'm going to be scripting what I need to say. Then I'm going to rehearse what I'm going to say. Then I'm going to look at my body. I'm going to record myself. I'm going to do that. And then 5 minutes before, I'm going to have a break. And then when I then come back in at 10 o'clock, I'm on it. I'm performance ready. And then you're going to do that for, let's say, 20 minutes, half an hour. And then as soon as that half an hour comes, you end the meeting and then you go out and you decompress and you recover. And and the thing is, it's a micro recovery, right? We mentioned going outside, listen to music, don't look at your screens, don't look at email. This is your time to really decompress and and get rid of all of the stress that you've been put yourself under in that performance phase. Stress is a good thing. It just needs to be managed effectively.
Completely. That's a wonderful example. So what I'm hearing in the context of, and you've alluded to the four phases here. So first of all is
Yeah.
conditioning, kind of starting the day with really good habits, and actually starting the day begins the night before with getting
Yeah.
a good night's sleep, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, and exercising, which gets the endorphins going, the blood flowing, the testosterone rises, you feel more mentally capable, mentally on it, being intentional about what you've prioritized for the day. So, then we're transitioning from that conditioning phase prior to the performance phase, where it's actually right. Let's prepare here, and let's even kind of visualize how this might go. What would great look like? Where might we where might this go wrong? What might be some of the challenges here that I'm going to face, and kind of prep yourself in advance,
Yeah.
giving yourself then some time before you actually go into performance mode, and address the priority that you've set. Anything that we should know in the context of this third phase, then the actual performance phase, what does great performance look like? I know it's context specific, but are there
Subjective,
things,
isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, are there things
Yeah.
that we should be aware of whenever we are on that will support our performance in the moment? Or are we relying then at that stage on our training? But what are some of
Yeah.
the things that we can actually do in the midst of performing?
Yeah, look, I think the number one is definitely the practice. I think we had a saying in the military that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. So, provided that you've practiced and rehearsed, and then it's progressive, and then you put a bit of stress at each level. So, if I was thinking about, I was working with a client for a tender pitch presentation, and we had 6 weeks. So I was like, okay, well, show us what you've got. What have you got here? And then, they didn't really have much. So then we trained it. But then each week I progressively increased the intensity and the skin in the game. So we videoed it, and then we had commentary, and then I had some extras come in to play the panel. So you're sort of building this. So by the time you get to that performance phase, you are ready. Now, when you're in the performance phase, it's then around, I use, depends on the person, but we can use some anchors to anchor positive feelings or thoughts or emotions. When I was working with skiers, we'd click the poles together, and then that's an audible cue to say, right, I'm focused, I'm in. Now, your performance phase, it could be short or it could be long. So that example with a difficult conversation, that's half an hour. That's a pretty short performance window. If, like for me, I'm delivering a whole week program, then the whole week I'm on performance mode. So it's identifying then when you're coming off that peak, and then putting in a bit of a recovery rather than a back to back. Oh, I've got like back to back presentations for like a week. You're going to be drained by the end of it if you don't put a break in between. And I see this within people's calendars when they are back to back on like Teams and Zoom meetings and things. And there's some great research around that where stress level just rises, right? And then you check out. So it's identifying when you are coming off that peak to then it's that is it Yerkes and Dobson, the performance curve, right? The U. So as you're then coming off, it's like, okay, let's be proactive. I need a bit of a rest for me then to go again. So you need to think about in little micro cycles as well if you're in a longer phase of your performance zone. So
So recovery is something that I feel as founders, as business leaders, we're not great at.
yeah,
You might have scheduled the 2 weeks during the summer, or a week at
yeah,
Christmas, but I often found, certainly in the height of our previous business, and we were scaling across 6 continents at that stage, exporting to more than 100 countries, and it was a team that we grew to from 15 to 700, that at Christmas I kind of fell into Christmas, and
yeah,
I could almost schedule when I was going to get a cold, when I was going to feel my
yeah,
worst. I can recall the number of Christmas dinners that I had that I couldn't taste the Christmas dinner because I was
yeah,
kind of feeling fluey. And so what does great recovery look like? How, I think we can intellectualize and
Yeah.
grasp. Yeah, we know we should have downtime, but like
Yeah.
maybe 2 weeks away in the sunshine where we're kind of maybe drinking and eating a lot is not necessarily recovery, and I'm not
No,
making any
it's not.
judgment here, but what
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
great recovery look like?
Yeah.
What does it look like, and how often should we be embedding this into our kind of as part of our periodization in the context of
Yeah.
scaling performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're describing there is something called the letdown effect. And that
Okay,
and
it
so
has a name.
it has a name, yes. So it's called the letdown effect, right? And that's when your body has been running um, hot for so long, and then what happens is because your body is like suppressing all of these coughs and colds, and to best just to get you to the finish line, and then you open yourself up, you go to Tenerife or wherever, and you catch a cold, and you open yourself up, right? So your immune system has been suppressed, and then suddenly it's open, and you get sick. And that's a sign there that you're not periodizing your year correctly. So when I talk about like recovery in the performance phase, I'm really big about micro recoveries. So 5 to 10 minutes between meetings, right? Taking a lunch break, having an afternoon little break, a morning break. So it's incorporating these within your day naturally. And so I'll say most people actually can do that. And then, so that's in the performance phase. In the recovery phase, when you're working with founders or owner founders, there's no way they're taking a week off or 2 weeks. It's just too much time. So instead of thinking about it as a big holiday, we just take a day off on a Friday and a day off on a Monday. So then you've got 4 days. And that's more manageable for people, I think, rather than going, hey, I'm going to take a week off. I don't trust my team, but what's going to happen? And then you're on holiday, but you're still working. So let's break it down into these smaller chunks. And recovery, really, it's that time for you to unplug. So from the business to take yourself out, again, subjective. It's whatever really re-energizes you. So for me, what re-energizes me is different. What re-energizes somebody else. I like activity. So when I have a break, I'm out there running, I'm cycling, I'm swimming, I'm surfing, and doing all that sort of stuff. That gives me energy. For other people, completely the opposite. That'll drain them. So really, it's that self-awareness to go, what gives me energy? Reading a good book. Great. Well, why don't you book a day and you just go and read a book for the whole day? No questions asked, off you go. For me, why don't you go and enter a race? Great. Okay, let's go and train for that. So and this is where you look at the book and it's like, okay, what's your individual strategy? So I work, with individuals to really question how do they actually recover, because no one's really talking about recovery. They think it's like one week here or 2 weeks there, but we need to do it during the day. And provided we've got the really good habits in the conditioning phase, then what that'll help us stay in the performance phase for longer, and will help us then sustain this whole performance over the year, and then over the next year, and then over the next year, and then before you know it, you're stacking the bricks.
It's the eighth wonder of the world, the compounding effect, as Charlie
That's
Munger
yeah,
reminds us, the compounding effect of good habits, or indeed the compounding effects
yeah,
of not so good habits. And so the listeners, I suspect, will hear, guys, come on, you're telling me to take a Friday off to go and read a book.
do it. Yeah,
Look, this isn't my reality right now. I'm
yeah,
trying to raise money. If I don't get this over the line in the next 2 weeks, I'm looking maybe at some team layoffs, or we've
yeah,
got to secure this big customer. Look, I can't. That all sounds lovely,
yeah,
but I can't do that right now. And what I see more often than not, they just move from one crisis to the next crisis to the
yeah.
next. So there's always a reason not to do this. What do you do in your work to encourage people to take that time out to actually recover. And people will grasp I don't think anyone will disagree with the fact that this
Yeah.
is important, that we can't be always on. Anyone who doesn't
Yeah.
get that at this stage, frankly,
Yeah.
I think, but we can't always be on. Even machines, you've got to turn them down for maintenance. You've got to bring your car in for servicing. You
Yeah.
just can't get in and run it consistently. And our bodies are systems.
Yeah.
They so what? How do you how do you kind of get to people and and such that actually they do take this time to recover?
Yeah. Do you know what? It is a hard one because I do hear that a lot. It's like, here you go. Great, Clint, but I'm busy. I'm like, "Oh, what do you, and as a coach, and this is where I work hand in hand with them, as a coach, I can ask the really obvious questions that they know what the answer is, but then when I ask it, it's just, oh, okay. So, I'll ask them, well, but have you got sick in the last 6 months? Oh yeah, okay, got sick. When was that? And what was the impact of that? How many days did you have off, or did you grind through? What's your turnover like? How many people have you churned over in your business? So it's actually bringing it back to a little bit of the reality and the numbers. What's the effect on relationships? Where do you want to be in 30 years from now? I know it's quite abstract, isn't it? But you know, especially if they got kids and a family, that's a massive impact on there. So really, I'm having these conversations and I'm trying to work out what is the lever that I can pull, and it's different for everybody. One client that I'm working with, really high performer, got running two businesses at the same time. But then I'm like, okay, so how old are you now? I'm 55. All right, so in 10 years' time, what do you want to be? Where do you want to be? What sort of lifestyle would you like? Where are you currently? So it's working what the goal is, what are they currently doing, and then building a plan with them. And as a coach, I can keep them accountable to that. I've had to fire a client before because they just weren't doing it. I was like, hey, you said you made this commitment that you would do this and you haven't done it. So what's your excuse? And I don't, you got to be hard sometimes, but I'm like, you employ me to help you manage your workload so you can make better decisions and you can grow your business. And what you're doing completely the opposite. So you're not ready. So and look, some people are just not going to be ready for that.
Let's get into calendar architecture. I love that term. And I certainly come across people who either don't have a calendar at all and
Yeah.
their day is dictated to by whatever's in their inbox or whatever comes to
Yeah.
their desk, or they do have a calendar but they're completely overscheduled because the calendar is an evolution of what they did before and what was appropriate for that stage of the business, but isn't
Yeah.
necessarily appropriate for the stage the business is at now. But essentially, it's an amalgamation of both, so they're completely overscheduled.
Yeah.
Step us through very practically, Clint, what great looks like from a calendar perspective in terms of architecting the kind of the perfect
Yeah.
week.
Yeah. Well, like I said, your calendar, you need to think as a performance tool, not as a time management tool. So you need to take control of your calendar. If you have EAs, for example, you need to set some really hard and fast rules and boundaries. So you need to look at it and then you need to say, right, I need to, my first one is you need a lunch break in there. It's a non-negotiable period in which you are away. You're eating food because you need to refuel yourself. So we look at, okay, lunch break in, where does that go? And it depends on people. What start time, what finish time are you going to work to? And I know a lot of people will work that, they'll come, pardon me, they'll finish and then they will then go home and then they'll log in later at night, and that's okay. But we need to have one stream for one day. Does that make sense? Like when you have got triple bookings and double bookings, it's quite a wide calendar space, right? So we need to just have one meeting at one time. So what we need to be doing is we need to then look at, okay, I'm blocking in at 8 to 8:30 for me. That's my time to get practical. And then what do I need to do? And then time block it. And then block in those times during the day in which you are, and we mentioned this like cognitive operating rhythm. So when you are at your peak energy, you're doing the most demanding task. And then you're doing, and when you come off that peak energy and you're in your recovery period, then you're doing all the admin tasks that you find easy. And then your next period through the day, that you're your peak energy, you're doing the high demanding tasks there. So it's being really intentional with how you structure all the tasks and the jobs and the projects that you've got. And that white space is really important too. That white space is your recovery time. So, and that recovery, we mentioned this quite a lot, is that it could be just looking out the window, zoning out, right? Just for 5 minutes. It could be in between meetings, I need to go to the toilet. So you need to take control of that. You can set, so rather than having like an open calendar, you can set in like Microsoft Office, and you got was it Calendly and other scheduling tools. You can
Calendly
just
is
set,
wonderful.
yeah, so I use that, and I've got specific time blocks in which people, if they want to then look at booking a time with me, well, here you go. This period from 10 till 10:30, that's when I'm at my lowest peak. So you can book in a time there. So because it's an easy thing for me to do. However, between 9 and 9:30, I'm doing all my accounts because that's a high demanding task. So I need to focus on that. So it's really time blocking as you go through the day and having periods where you've got nothing booked in for you to recover and to just think clearly, to have a bit of white space. I think we're in danger of like overloading ourselves with more meetings and more inputs and stuff like that. So have deep work. I think as well, don't accept any meetings with no agendas or no outcomes. I think we're really guilty in doing that. People are just looking, oh, that time works for me, so I'm going to book it in for everybody else. And it's really painful to start with because people then have to think about, oh, we're going to have a meeting about revenue, right? Or sales, right? What do I need to talk? So have that agenda. The great thing is with Outlook, you can already book it in. It's just in the bottom, right? So you can add that function to add an agenda to the meeting that you have anyway. So you can, I'm pretty hard and fast with that. But again, as a leader, you set the tone, right? So if you are accepting all these meetings, then your calendar's going to be crazy all over the show anyway. So so we need to protect that. And then we look at the week. So if I am working internationally, then I've got my time zones on there as well. So maybe I work late on a Tuesday night. So then on a Wednesday morning, it's a bit of a light period for me. And then and then maybe Thursday again, it's in the office 9 till 5, whatever that is. And then Friday, you're working from home or not, or got to pick the kids up. I'd put all that stuff in there as well, so no one can book in my time. But ultimately, it's a performance tool that you need to take control of, rather than letting other people just control it for you.
Here, here. I've never heard it referred to as a performance tool, but it makes complete sense. And I keep saying to my team, if it's not in the calendar, for me, it's not happening. So,
Yeah.
if you want to get time with me, make sure that, or commit me to doing something, make sure that it's actually in the calendar and we've agreed that in
Yeah.
advance. So I have to say, something that I've been using the last number of years is Jesse Itzler's big ass calendar. So it's huge. It sits in my
Yeah.
gym. All of the days are in there for the entire year. And the first thing that I do, and I typically do this over Christmas, is schedule in monthly mini breaks, so long
Yeah.
weekends, as you've talked about. And they not only give you an opportunity to rejuvenate whenever you're enjoying those breaks, but actually in the course of any given month, they give you something to look forward to. And so you're
Yeah.
scheduling time in your calendar with family, with friends, in environments that you really enjoy, doing things that you like to do. And so those things go in first, and then I kind of build
Yeah.
the year, and those work commitments around that. In
Yeah.
terms of actually, and we've talked about kind of the importance of leading ourselves first. In the context of leading our teams, what's the single biggest lever that a leader can pull to improve their team's cognitive performance? So, we're not only operating as a cognitive athlete, but actually we've
Yeah.
got a team performing as a cognitive team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think number one, you need to role model what culture that you want. So if your calendar, your performance tool is really important, then you need to role model that. And then what will happen is everyone else will do the same. If you're working in a team, you need to do exactly what you've just said there. We need to sit down at the start of the year. Okay, when are our peak windows? When do we need, when do we need to be our peak performance? And every business works in cycles. So if we know that it's quarterly business, then at the end of the quarter is really busy, then we book it in. And that period is for our team, no one's taken any leave. But at the end of that, then we can take 3, 4 days off or a week off. So we have these windows in which our team know when we're going to be, I hate that word busy, but when when we need to be in peak performance mode. And then there are periods when we don't need to be in peak performance mode. And then there are periods where we're training. So we're building our skill acquisition, whatever that is. Maybe it's our sales skills, maybe it's our zero skills, maybe it's our pitching. But if we build that into the year, then that number one is good for employee retention, right, and engagement. So we're investing in people. We're giving them a bit of ownership over their calendar and how they then run their year. And then it gives them the clarity, like, what are we here to do? What's our season? Oh, our season is 12 months. We're peaking every quarter. Great. So now I know I've got 4 periods where I need to be on point, and then the rest of the time I'm recovery or I'm training or I'm just building my foundations and then going back. So I think sitting down with your team, sharing the whole calendar over, the whole overview gives them clarity, and then that's the season that's missing. So, like I said, in sport, there's a season. What's winning, what's losing, put it out there. We have these strategic plans, 2 to 5 years, very aspirational, but let's get tactical. For this 12 months, what does it look like? What's the revenue we want to hit? What's the impact we want to make with our clients, with the community? What's winning? Let's document it and then look at the year. When do we need to peak? When do we need to recover? Get everyone empowered to think about it like that.
In terms of team cohesion and creating this collection of cognitive athletes, something that you talk about in your book is kind of the adventure days that you had in the military, which
Yeah.
I thought was interesting. Essentially, you guys are very deliberate about those team bonding exercises. Has that a place in business, or it's often perceived as a little bit hokey? We'll book a day, we'll
Yeah.
go on paintball or whatever. But what does a great team building day look like, such that we all feel like we've recovered, we come away from it super energized, and there's been a level of bonding and alignment.
Yeah.
If we could architect a great team day, what does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I think it has to align with purpose. The number one thing. Like I've had some good team days, I've had some bad team days, and the bad team days is like, oh, it's just a day out making pizzas. Great. Well, what's the bigger purpose? If you're like in a social enterprise, well, let's go and we've got a company over here. Um, Oh, so basically, they take all the food scraps. Oz Harvest, it's called. They take all the food scraps from conferences and Woolies and like it's a Tesco and Asda, and then they cut it up and they cook food and then they give it to the homeless people. So
Amazing.
that's more purposeful if you're in a social enterprise, right? If you're more in a sporting context, well, like the NRL over here, I've worked with them. So why don't you go and do something that's more sporty that is more resonates with the business outcome that you want? And there's nothing wrong with doing something fun either, right? So it just depends. I wouldn't be doing anything too fun near a real peak performance phase because I would be wanting to sharpen the saw, so to speak. So, maybe we can do at the start of the year, do some fun stuff, go out. I wouldn't do paintballing. I don't like it. It's just, you're just going to shoot the boss all the time, right? So, um,
I've been there.
canoeing is great. Or dragon boat racing, right? And what the good thing is with dragon boat racing, you do it for 8 weeks and then you enter a competition. And I know, like in Sydney, I did it with some rowers, a company, and we just went out doing some rowing, and they end up capsizing a lot. And then, it's just fun. It's just that shared experience. I think in the military, we have this shared experience of of going through some tough times together, which galvanizes the team. So if that's your purpose, enter him in a dragon boat race for 8 weeks where they've got to train and you're building that resilience. And then there's this shared talk amongst the office and things. So again, it just depends on what you're trying to get out of it. But yeah, it just
Yeah,
depends. Yeah.
I really like that. Make it purposeful and ensure that you're kind of leveraging shared experiences, creating something that actually um, is the catalyst for a shared experience. And not only does it create that level of bonding, but it gives that center point to have conversations over lunch. And so I really, really like that. Just, Clint.
Just one thing. So like in the military, we used like adventure training as the medium for personal and professional development. So we use that in the transition phase. So before people went out to Afghanistan and Iraq, we took them out for a week and we did some adventure training activities. Like we went down the mines, we went canoeing and kayaking, we did high ropes, we did land navigation exercises, overnight expeditions, you name it. So we're simulating some pressure in a really controlled environment before, to build teamwork, to build leadership, to build communication and team cohesion. And then when they went out to wherever they're going, they're working much better together as a team. So for me, that's where that whole team development days really need that purpose, because otherwise it's a waste.
You mentioned something there, creating a controlled environment. I really liked the framing that you give this in your book about focusing on activities above the line as opposed to
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
caught up in kind of the mental frustration and annoyance of things below the line. Can you just, for our listeners, explain the difference
Yeah.
between focusing above the line as opposed to below the line?
Yeah, look, this is one of the easiest things to understand, hardest to implement, but it's gold. So you've got above the line thinking and below the line thinking. So above the line, you're taking ownership, accountability, responsibility. You're looking at options, alternatives, and solutions. Below the line, negative, victim mentality, blaming other people. So when I use this with teams and myself, I use it every single day, every single day to just judge myself. Like, do I feel above the line today? Like, am I thinking about options, alternatives, and solutions, no matter what happens, right? And you're going to go below the line. So think of it as a continuum, and you're going to go up and down this continuum through the day, but it's being aware of where you are right now at that sort of moment. When I work it with teams, they get it straight away. And then it's a really easy way. If we think about team culture, it's a really easy way to start calling people out in a really easy, nice way to go, oh, it's a bit below the line, isn't it? Lol. Mm. Or what would an above the line response be? Oh, yeah, I didn't think like that because I'm so annoyed with one of our vendors. They've just been really annoying me. Okay, let's park that. Let's acknowledge it, but then let's think about, okay, what are some options here for you to think about moving this forward? So what you're doing, you're actually empowering people with the power of choice and thinking about responses rather than reactions to certain stimulus, So I have this every single day, If I don't get up early enough in the morning, then I'm already on the back foot. So, because I've got got like two kids and they're up at like 5 a.m. in the morning, and I feel hijacked if I don't get up a little bit earlier to then do my stuff for me, to then be ready for them when they're up, if that makes sense.
It makes
So
complete sense. And
I'd be sort of like below the line, a little bit below, and then I'll stub my toe on the ensuite, and then I'll spill toothpaste on my shirt, and then I have a flat tire, and I've got a performance review at 9 a.m. I'm like, "Wah." And then you got to step back and go, what are options here? Well, the option is I just phone ahead and say, hey, can we just move this for an hour? Great. Now I've got control, and then everything's sweet.
yeah, look, again, resonates so strongly. Psyche is the very first principle of our 10 principle Scale X framework. And we talk about either being in an empowered state or a disempowered
Yeah.
state. So, in your language, Clint, either you're operating above the line, which is going to be conducive and act as a catalyst for scaling
Yeah.
success or you're operating below the line. And it's just having that level of awareness to know when you're above the line or below the line. Love that
It's hard.
language and love that framing. It is,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's at least when you're having conversations like this, you can
Yeah.
create a level of awareness, and that's what we want. And language around it, and
Yeah.
language that actually we can use with our team as well. So that's super useful. Before we move into the close, I mean, if we
Yeah.
look ahead, what do you think is the biggest threat to cognitive performance for business leaders?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this. I think it's just is information overload. I think we think AI, social media, our phones are there. We can access the whole world whenever we want. Anyone can access us, so it's always there. So many notifications, so many distractions just in the palm of your hand. And I think with the news cycles as well, news is available everywhere. On every social media app, you're getting some person saying something with comments and likes. Is that getting you closer to your goal? Yes or no? It's not. So, but that's going to be the discipline to be able to put that stuff down. And then on the other hand, you've got AI as well. And AI is a great tool, right? You can really leverage it. But the danger is now we've got these two tools. They're filling in all of the white space that we should have in our calendars for us to think, to compartmentalize, to make decisions. And now we've got this, I think, over reliance on leveraging AI to do all of our thinking, to be creative, to take control over our narrative. What is my opinion on this? I don't know. What does ChatGPT or Grok or whatever say? So we're sort of in this dangerous place where we're actually losing our core skills of a human, right? Humans are different to machines because we've got this brain, and this brain is there to help us think, to be creative, to be able to take information and synthesize it, to make really good decisions, have a great life. But we're in danger of just and I even feel this at the moment, right? So there's so much information coming, and you've got to be so disciplined to say no and to switch notifications off and to turn your phone on do not disturb and not watch not watch as much um, news. So you got to be, there's just a lot out there at the moment. So I think if we don't do that, then we're in this, we're going to outsource all of our human mind out to social media and AI in particular.
I feel your work has never been more important than now. We have an assault of social media, and the developers, the programmers of the social media apps are so clever in terms of the design to keep people on. I watch my own kids, and these are young adult kids who could just stay on there for hours
Yeah,
if there wasn't a level of discipline there to do other things. But um, the and then AI, it's this kind of crutch that every time we we have this challenge, or indeed we want to know something, we're going straight to ChatGPT. And I feel back to
yeah,
your point, a knife is a wonderful tool, for a
yeah,
surgeon, but in the wrong hands, it's deadly. It's
yeah,
understanding how we use these tools, and then the so we've got the social media, we've got AI. It's really appreciating just how much cognitive space that these things take up. So, look, I want to thank you for what you're doing, Clint. I mean, the importance of actually embedding good habits into our day to day to support us to scale with purpose, and ensuring that actually we create these moments to transition before we get into high performance work, and then taking a suitable time to recover. That makes complete sense. Can you share with our leaders, as we move into the close, three timeless takeaways?
yeah, absolutely. I think number one, we need to design what our work looks like. So we need to look ahead. over 12 months. And we need to identify our peaks and troughs. So number one, we need to design our year, take control over it. And then we need to then protect our thinking capacity, so our cognitive load. We need to manage that effectively. And then number three, then we need to start training our brain like athletes train their bodies by identifying things that we say no to, things that we say yes to. We do some exercise, we go outside, we have some discipline, and and we'll be on fire.
Folks, there you go. You've heard it from the personal trainer to the military elite and to Olympians. So please, please, please take heed in the context of your scaling ambition. Clint, what's next for you? So the book has just come out. What are you focused on now?
I would like to say like a world tour with the book.
You're in a
Yeah, so the book's
recovery phase now.
that's yeah, like we mentioned at the start, yeah. Yeah, so I've got the book out, and that's really I'm having these broken record conversations a lot, so it's timely to come out and to release a book. So I'm working on that at the moment. Working on leadership programs for organizations and continuing coaching for the foreseeable future, to be honest. So just trying to get the word out because I think some of these concepts are really we know it, but it's like how do we then implement it in our day to day? And for me, that's my passion is here, come here, let me help you, help yourself, and it's going to feel wrong, and but it's going to get you the results that you ultimately want. So yeah, that's where I'm sort of heading. No, there'll be another book in the pipeline somewhere, I'm sure.
No doubt. Well, look, Clint, if people want to learn a little bit more about you and your work and actually lean on your work to support them
Yep.
with implementing the kind of the cognitive athlete framework, how best to connect with you.
Yeah, so I hang out on LinkedIn. That's my sort of main driver. I've tried Instagram and Facebook, and there are probably accounts on there, but I just very rarely do that. So there, LinkedIn, you can head over to the website cognitiveathlete.com.au. Being in Australia, I'm on there. Grab a copy of the book. I've also got a podcast called the same, The Cognitive Athlete as well. So it's just bite-sized 10-minute episodes. At the moment, I'm in the recording cycle of an actual 10-week sprint. So for myself, I work in 10-week sprints. So I've just mirrored that and we sort of break it down into really bite-sized, actionable steps that people can take straight away. So, and that's available Spotify and Apple and Amazon and everywhere else.
Brilliant. Well, look, Clint, I want to thank you for taking your time to write this book. It's really important, especially kind of I forgot to mention the third thing that's distracting us right now: AI, social media, and the news right now.
Yeah.
It seems we can't keep away from it, with everything that's going on in the world. So thank you for actually putting this work out there. Thank you for showing up with so prepared and with so much wisdom today and applied experience and so much practical takeaways. So I appreciate everything you do. I wish you every success with the book, with the podcast, and your work. Take care.
Thanks, Brendan. Much appreciated.